Most of us remember Skylanders. It was a huge part of our childhood. A lot of us played the standard console games, but what nobody really talks about are the other versions that released alongside them. The 3DS versions. That's right, every single year alongside the main console release, they released a portable version. But here's the interesting part. Every single one of them is different from its console counterpart. So in this video, I'll be exploring each of them and discussing what sets them apart in such unique ways. And also, how does this even work? But first I should mention, I'm playing this on actual 3DS hardware with a capture card, so my experience is genuine. This is exactly how I would have felt if I were a kid in 2011 booting up these games. Oh, I should also say, while I play through these games, if a Skylander dies, it's permanent. Starting with the first entry, Skylanders Spyro's Adventure. Now this game stands out to me a ton. It's the first in the series, but also, I actually had it when I was a kid. I'm pretty sure my brother bought it just for the exclusive Igniter and Dark Spyro figures. And while we primarily played the console versions growing up, I think we bought this under the assumption that it was the exact same game, just, in 3D. Which, let's be real, I'm sure a lot of people when they were younger thought that as well. Now, the gameplay itself. Right away, you can tell it's completely different than the console version. And trust me, I played all the console versions recently. You can check out that video after. The game starts off with a brand new, overly compressed video that plays at like 12 frames per second. But what's cool is that you can watch it in 3D. This shows off the brand new storyline that is completely different than the console versions. Like Chaos, he's not even in this one. Now for the moment of truth, actually getting the Skylanders into the game. But since this is a 3DS, it's a little different. Instead of plugging in a portal via USB and keeping a wired portal or wireless portal beside you at all times, they use this IR sensor on the back of the 3DS, which by the way, is the first time I'm using this. Like I completely forgot that this was even a feature on this console. Once you grab the 3DS exclusive portal, you can press the platform itself and turn it on. Then you can scan the portal with the 3DS, then place a Skylander on, and then hold it perfectly still while it gets scanned in. To be honest, it's a pretty finicky process. When you scan a Skylander, it stays in the game. It gets stored in this little crystal. And this game gives you 2 crystals, which means that at any time, you can have 2 Skylanders stored on the 3DS when you play. This is fine, but the problem comes when you want to play as another Skylander. You have to remove one of your Skylanders from a crystal and replace it with another one. You can only have 2 on at a time, which means that anytime you wanted to change Skylanders, you had to rescan it, which means that you had to go through the same scanning torture multiple times. But once you scan in the Skylander, you can just play the game without it. And this is actually pretty cool. It still holds that magic feel, just not the same magic as the other Skylanders games. You very quickly forget that there's a physical Skylander with you once you start playing. I would say the most annoying part of this process is how you actually have to hold the 3DS in place and how it perfectly needs to line up with the portal. This takes way too long. But once you're actually playing the game, it does something that is, quite honestly, insane. You see, in the first Skylanders game on console, Skylanders couldn't jump. Do you see where I'm going with this? In the 3DS version of the game, every Skylander can jump. On top of that, every character also has a dash, a projectile or special move, and a close-range combat option. This is fantastic. It makes every Skylander feel super unique, just like the console games. But here, there's an extra layer of depth because of that jump. And on top of that, the level design is actually phenomenal. I did not expect to say that. I thought the console games had great level design, but I would argue the 3DS version is even better. The environments and atmosphere just feel cooler, and I think the jumping mechanic this game introduces greatly enhances the gameplay. This is a platformer at its core, compared to the console version's more roguelike mechanics. And while you're platforming through these levels, you'll encounter hordes of enemies, and these guys, they're big meanies. But the way each Skylander fights them, that makes this version stand out. Most characters in the 3DS version have an entirely new moveset or a more in-depth one. Like Dark Spyro. On console, he's pretty tame. He can shoot fire, ram into people, and fly. But in the 3DS version, he can do all those things plus a full hand-to-hand combat fighting moveset, which makes him way more fun and interesting to play. The core gameplay loop has you running through these more basic platforming levels, but then there are also levels that are essentially just big arena battles. They're shorter, but an absolute blast. The whole point of this game is to collect gems by completing levels and finishing challenges within those levels. Things like not eating food or playing a specific element. Once you earn enough of these crystals, you can unlock the next worlds. Now some challenges to move forward were actually kind of difficult, which made progressing to the next world a lot tougher than I expected, but I didn't mind it because the gameplay was really fun. Now one thing I think is missing is the character upgrades. You don't upgrade your Skylanders moves individually anymore. From my understanding, in this version, as you level up your character with XP, your Skylander just passively gets stronger in combat and gains more health and sometimes new moves. games. And this is probably the biggest downgrade compared to the console version. A huge part of the magic in the main games was feeling like you were actually upgrading your toy. But in this one, it's not the same. And yes, while you're still upgrading, and you can carry your upgrade to the console version of the game, it's just not the same. And speaking of upgrading, this is also a good time to point out that the levels and coins actually carry over between console and 3DS versions, which is really cool. That means that if you got both versions, you can go back and forth. What in the world? You just gotta scan the character back on the 3DS before you put it on the console version. Now, while I said character upgrades might be a problem, the actual problem is the 3DS itself. My 3DS was chugging trying to run this game. I figured it would run perfectly fine since I'm using the new Nintendo 3DS XL, which is way more powerful than the OG 3DS this game was actually designed for. But no, this game feels very unoptimized and it was just hitching constantly. Every time an enemy showed up, or even when there was just a lot happening in the environment, the frame rate tanked. And oh my goodness, sometimes it was just hard to tell what was even happening. Mix all that in with the already low resolution, and this game in today's landscape isn't exactly the prettiest. But for a 3DS game, it actually looks pretty good. The frame rate is capped at 30 frames per second, which for a platformer isn't super ideal, but considering how graphically advanced this game is for a 3DS, it makes sense. Now, the character models compared to the console versions are also much lower quality. Look at Trigger Happy. He looks like he drank some sort of ugly potion or something. My man is struggling. And look, Dwayne's back! We love Dwayne. We love Dwayne. We love Dwayne. We love Dwayne. He's back and he rocks. Every single level in this game is completely remade from scratch. Nothing about this game and the console version is the same. Like, it's completely different. Overall, I really like the level design. I love that they added more mechanic and completely recreated some mechanics and movesets in the 3DS version. And overall, they just made it a better single player experience because, let's face it, the levels in 3DS are miles ahead of the original Spyro's Adventure. Sadly, after playing this game though, we must say goodbye to our fallen troopers, Trigger Happy and Dark Spyro. Rest in peace to the boys. But our first look at Spyro's Adventure, it was actually pretty good. A tier. Oh yeah, we're ranking these. Next up, Skylanders Giants. On console, this one was really good, so I'm excited to see how the 3DS version holds up. Once again, as soon as we start the game, we're met with a fully animated original cutscene, which is very low quality. It's a compressed mess and looks awful. But at least we get to see this pirate boss. Once again, this version has a completely different storyline from the console version. Our boy Chaos still doesn't exist. This feels very similar to the previous 3DS installment. It's a completely original level design where you bash the heck out of enemies while gathering food and coins. Oh yes, there's coins now instead of this aura stuff. And from what I can tell, there isn't really a big difference in what these are used for. In fact, now that I think about it, I don't even know what this gold is used for. I thought it would be for upgrading your Skylanders, but it's actually not. I think it's only for the challenges at the end of the level. If you collect a certain amount of gold, you get a star. Because just like in Spyro's Adventure, the way you level up Skylanders and Giants on 3DS is that you just earn XP and the characters auto upgrade. The level format is also very different. They're mostly standard levels now with fewer battle arena levels. The challenges are a bit more complicated, but still doable. The main hub is also very similar to the console version. You're on a ship, and we love ships. It's not as diverse as the one on console, but hey, it's not horrible. And while we're on the topic of level design, just like the first game, the level design here is actually really great. And once again, this level design feels better in a single player experience than even the console version, mainly because of the jumping mechanic, which really adds to the level design and the overall gameplay experience. Although the jumping animation on some of the giants looks very janky. I mean, look at Tree Rex. Mans is jumping like a weird guy. This game is largely just an add-on to the previous one, with some changes to the overall gameplay loop. It does have a handful of reused assets like the older character models, but I expected that. It makes sense. The new characters though are a fun addition. The Giants. They're fun because they're giant, and that's pretty much it. From a gameplay and level design perspective, they don't really add much. They just break down special walls that only giants can destroy, which helps complete certain challenges by the end of the level. And that's all they do. I don't even think you need a giant to actually beat the game. The only other unique ability they have is the Jump Smash, which lets you break through floors and take out enemies. Now, just like we discovered in the first 3DS game, this version has completely remade movesets from the console versions. The attacks are mostly the same, but they feel very different. I found that the Giants attacks in this version are a lot stiffer, even compared to the previous 3DS game and the console versions. You definitely feel like you're a giant, but I don't think you feel as giant as you should feel. And I think that mainly has to do with how the camera is in this game. Is it just me, or is the camera zoomed out more in this one? It makes sense since the levels are a little bigger, but at the same time it makes the Giants feel smaller. Maybe I'm just nitpicking, I don't know. Also in Giants on console, they added a lot of voice lines to the characters, but in Giants on 3DS, they either completely changed them or didn't add them at all. For example, where's the iconic "Hail to the Whale" from Thumpback? Instead, now he just says his name, Thumpback.
Hail to the whale!
This is absolutely tragic. But there's one glaringly obvious issue I faced throughout this entire playthrough, and I'm sure you've already noticed it by now, and that's the frame rate. It's unbelievable. I just can't believe how unoptimized this game actually is. Every level, even if nothing was happening, the game would chug. Even worse than the first game. And then when there was actually something going on, the game literally became unplayable at times. Like, this was really bad, especially when giants were on the screen. It was like the game just actually couldn't handle it. When I was in the main hub on the ship, it was fine. But once you stepped into a level, the frame rate instantly tanked. And it's not just the frame rate. The resolution also takes a huge hit. Once you're in a level, it looks like the resolution just split in half. Once again, I'm playing on the new 3DS XL, and this was available on the original 3DS. I did not think this was going to be a problem, but it was still broken. Also, I still hate the portal in this. B tier. Also, rest in peace, Shroom Boom. Next up, Swap Force time. Alright, after booting up Swap Force, it's the same thing as the last two 3DS games. You start it up, watch a very compressed cutscene of the same pirate meanie head from the previous installments, which by the way, I don't care about, and of course, jump into gameplay. You get the idea at this point. You run through very linear levels, bash enemies, collect gold, and do all the usual Skylanders stuff. So let's skip to the new things this game adds. First off, the figures. Swap Force introduces characters that can swap their top and bottom halves with each other, which is such a cool concept. Definitely more interesting than just being big. The main reason you'd want to swap figures is because of the new gates in the game. We still have the usual elemental gates, but now there are additional gates designed for the specific bottom half abilities. These are the swap zones. Each bottom half ability has a specific use, like this fella, Octopus Man. He can climb walls because of his ladder icon on his bottom half. The thing about these bottom half abilities though, is that they all have a recharge mechanic, which is just kind of pointless. Though when you're in a gate, there's usually ways to replenish them, so I guess it's not that big of a deal. Meanwhile, the top half of the Skylanders is just a basic Skylander. That's where all their attacks come from, and that's about it. Once again, upgrades are automatically given to Skylanders, but this time it's a little different. This might sound confusing, but on the console version, both the top and bottom halves had separate upgrade paths. You were essentially doubling your Skylanders upgrades. On console, the top half carried gold, which could then be used to upgrade the legs, but in this version, since upgrades are automatically given to you through XP, there's no way to upgrade with coins. And since XP only applies to the top half, that's the only part that actually gets stronger, which is fine, but in this game, you just can't upgrade the bottom halves of your Skylanders anymore. So, I mean, if you look at it from that way, you're essentially losing half of the Skylanders upgrades. So is that half the value per Skylander? That's for you to decide. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Now, I love the level design in the first two games, and this game is no exception. The level design in Swap Force for 3DS is still fantastic. It feels very similar to the previous games, but that's fine because those were great. The platforming still fully utilizes jumping, and the levels are designed perfectly around it. The jumping in Swap Force isn't as weird this time though, since this was finally the first console Skylanders game to introduce jumping too. Still, I think the 3DS version actually used its jumping mechanic better. I think it mainly comes down to the fact that this is a single player experience, whereas the console versions always had to design their platforming around 2 players. That meant making jumps easier and levels bigger to accommodate co-op. And after comparing both versions, especially their use of jumping, I think that's what makes the 3DS game feel a little more epic. It's designed specifically with one player in mind, and that's what I felt about every game so far. These are actually really good single-player experiences, especially compared to the console counterpart. Also in Swap Force, they randomly added these key mini-games from Spyro's Adventure for some reason. There aren't many of them, but they're here. I don't remember these being in a previous 3DS game, but the weirdest thing is that in Swap Force on console, these key mini-games were actually removed and replaced with the electricity puzzles. So why the heck are they in the 3DS version? Still, while the overall level design continues to impress me, that's not even the best part. The real game changer this installment is the figure storing ability. That's right, Skylander data now gets stored on the 3DS itself, which means I don't have to constantly finesse the stupid portal more than once for the same character, unless I wanted to save it back onto the portal. Seriously, I think this was the biggest problems in the previous games. Having to scan a new figure every single time was a huge pain. Now with Swap Force, they gave us a new portal that is more powerful and can scan swappable figures. We went from this to this. And while it claims to be faster, it still takes over 10 seconds to scan Swap Force characters and roughly 5 seconds for regular figures. That might not sound like much, but count it out loud. Keep in mind you gotta keep the 3DS still the entire time. Thankfully, once you scan them in, you can swap Skylanders anytime using the bottom screen. With swappable figures, you can even change the top and bottom halves right from the menu. And of course, you can still use Skylanders from previous games, which is obvious at this point. Now in this game, I'm glad that the giants weren't completely forgotten here. There are plenty of walls for them to smash through. And if you don't have a giant, no worries, they just leave bombs lying around instead. And of course, just like in previous installments, the music is fantastic. fantastic. Yeah, the music is fantastic in all these Skylanders games. Now, because the 3DS is as fast as the speed of a slug, even though swapping figures is way easier now, the bottom menu screen takes forever to load. It gets painfully slow in menus, but honestly, it's still better than having to scan a figure every single time you wanted to swap. So yeah, it's slow, but I'll take it. Now, the performance of the game itself, it's not as bad as Giants, thankfully, but it was still pretty bad. The game is constantly chugging, and the only reason I say it's not as bad is because the frame rate doesn't drop as low, but it's still horribly inconsistent, which just makes it painful to look at. So yes, it is better optimized than Giants, but it still runs really bad. Here's the plus side though, I didn't kill any Skylanders this game. Let's go. A tier alert, this was actually really fun, I liked it. But before we move on, I just wanted to say that I streamed this game, and when I did, it was so much fun playing with you all. But if you were there, you might have noticed something weird, in a good way. While I was running around, digging through bins of Skylanders, the camera just kept following me, like this. It zoomed in when I moved closer, panned when I slid over the figures, it zooms when I move back, and follows me when I go side to side. Look at that. What even is this? It's like it knows what I'm doing. And that's because it kind of does. This camera is called the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite, and lucky for all of us, they're sponsoring this video. This thing has seriously upgraded my setup. The OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite is an AI-powered 4K webcam. This camera tracks you in real time, moves smoothly, and zooms in automatically. Whoa! And just makes you look like you actually know what you're talking about. Whether I was swapping Skylanders midstream or bending down to grab one from the giant bin beside my desk, it followed me without missing a beat. And it's not just face tracking. It follows your hands, your feet, your upper body, and zooms in on what you choose. Yeah, baby, I love it. It's got a 1/2-inch sensor, which means even in low light, this image looks crisp. I'm actually very impressed how little light I have going on right now. Look how much is brightening on my face. Like, it just looks good. And the audio is also incredibly clear. It's got dual omnidirectional microphones with adjustable noise reduction, so you can sound clean even if you're streaming from a noisy room, or in my case, if Skylanders are smashing around on your desk. I'm testing out the microphone right now. Listen to how good and crisp this sounds. Plus, it has preset modes, which is honestly one of my favorite features. I've saved different setups for my regular face cam shot, and even one for vertical videos. It takes like 2 seconds to switch in between them. You can mount it landscape, portrait, even upside down, and can control it through the OBSBOT Center app, or hook it up to something like your Stream Deck. And despite all this, it's just $179. I genuinely expected this to be like twice the price. And I'm glad it's not, because now I can actually recommend it. So if you want to stream, teach, present, or just look good on a Zoom call, check out the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite. It'll be the first link in the description. Huge thanks to OBSBOT for sponsoring this video. And now, back to me getting emotionally attached to plastic toys. Goodbye. All right, next game, Trap Team. If you've watched my videos about the console games, you know I have a few issues with Trap Team, but let's objectively look at this as its own game. Once again, we have a compressed opening cutscene, but this time, it's not nearly as animated as the last games. Instead, it's basically a high-effort slideshow with PNGs and epic music, which makes a lot more sense, because they probably realized they didn't need a massive CGI cutscene for a game that can't even play them properly. And while it's still extremely compressed, the simpler animation makes it way easier to see on the 3DS screen. Speaking of the story, it's actually changed the main villain. We finally got rid of the evil pirate guy. Instead, we have a sheep and a dinosaur villain who puts people to sleep. Am I the only one who thinks this is kind of lame? Like, the last villain wasn't the best, but at least he tried to be mean. This just seems like a joke. They have this super childish back and forth banter, which completely lowers the stakes of the game and makes the story feel even more childish. And by the way, that was one of my biggest issues with the console version. But anyway, let's talk about the main gimmick of this game, traps. That's right, using traps, you can capture villains and play as them. At least that's what you should be able to do. Because that was the gimmick in the console versions. It was the big selling point. In fact, they even made unique portals just for traps, so you can scan them and hear the villains talking. But the 3DS version still uses the same portal as Swap Force. And as you can see, there's no space for me to scan a trap. That's because, boys and girls, traps aren't compatible in this version of the game, which is wild to me. Why is the main gimmick of the game not even possible on the 3DS version? My guess is that they didn't want to design another exclusive 3DS portal, but even then, you just know there were kids on day one who bought traps thinking they could use them, only to find out that they literally can't. Now again, if you've seen my console review, you already know I'm not a huge fan of this gimmick anyway. I feel like it added very little to the game overall, so you might be asking, why is it called Trap Team still? And how does the trap mechanic work in this version? Well, instead of trapping villains in crystals, you just trap them in the console itself. After a level, you'll see a villain, and instead of using a trap, you just swirl your finger on the 3DS bottom screen to capture them. The thing is, capturing villains in this game works completely different from the main console versions. In the console version, you could play as the trapped villains during levels, but on 3DS, during a level, you actually can't play as them at all. You can just summon them every once in a while to do a little extra damage to the enemies you encounter, and that's pretty much it. So far, the trap mechanic sounds pretty lame, but they do make up for it a little bit. After every level, after you trap an enemy, you go into these villain boot camps. Here you can actually play as the trapped villains, finally. And I will say these little challenges can be surprisingly fun, especially if you're trying to get 3 stars by completing challenges or trying to speed through a level. However, only some of them are actually fun. And there are a few that are just boring and tedious, like this hiding minigame. All of these boot camps are pretty straightforward and not very in-depth. They especially don't flesh out these villains as much as the console version does. And they don't even have full-on movesets, which is fine considering they're not actually in a level. But if you were to make me choose between the traditional trap team mechanic and this one, I'd probably still go with the console version. It doesn't completely skew away from the Skylanders formula and lets me keep playing the core gameplay loop. So after all of that, while yes, the trap mechanic isn't perfect, they make up for it with these little villain boot camps enough to justify Trap Team being in the title. The other new characters this time around are the Trap Masters, which aside from being incredibly strong, just break these crystals so you get more diamonds. So yeah, they also changed the gold to diamonds for some reason. I don't know why. They just did. Oh, also this game continues what Swap Force did and lets you keep the Skylanders on the 3DS system without needing to constantly rescan them, which is amazing. It's still slow, but I'm happy it's here. When it comes to Skylanders upgrades though, it's still just the automatic upgrades like we've seen before, and they all have the same moveset as the previous 3DS installments, which is exactly what I expected, and that's fine. As for the rest of the game, it's very similar to the past Skylanders game on 3DS, very linear levels again, basic enemy fights, and your wide array of simple puzzles, and that's basically it. However, there is a noticeable difference when it comes to the level design that I can't help but notice. It's just not as good, and inferior to other Skylanders 3DS games so far. The levels in this one are actually kind of boring, and that might be an unpopular opinion, but after playing all these games side by side, the creativity is seriously lacking. Let me give you an example. The first several levels take place in a temple setting, which by itself isn't a bad idea, but for some reason, there are just random floating platforms that have no real purpose other than being a random floating platform. Whereas in other Skylanders 3DS games, instead of some random floating platform, it would have been like a frozen tree in time, making the game feel more epic. I know I might be nitpicking, but I'm not done yet. The overall pace of the levels was much slower. I'd constantly get stuck talking to some random character, or worst of all, dealing with these gates. There were so many gates that had locks on them, and every time I had to go find a key to unlock it. This happened several times per level, and it definitely felt like they were just padding out the runtime. But the worst part is that some of these keys required me to play Sky Stones. I know this is a hot take, but I really don't like Sky Stones. I got a lot of hate for how mean I was to Sky Stones in my last video, but I will continue to defend myself. Forcing me a slow, grid-based minigame isn't as fun as playing the actual game. And after suffering through the mid-level design in these stages, and then making me play Sky Stones felt like a slap in the face. It felt completely shoehorned in for no reason. I'd be fine if it was just an option, but this was mandatory. So yes, the overall level design in Sky Stones isn't my favorite, and it's not horrible, just worse than the previous entries, which really just goes to show how good the previous entries were. Now when it comes to the 3DS performance, it seems like this game actually holds a more stable frame rate than even Swap Force. Now don't get me wrong, it's still pretty bad. It's better, and at this point, that's all that matters. And a cool mechanic they added to the 3DS itself is they added a lot of bottom screen features, which is actually pretty unique. They make you break locks on screen when you find a chest, or draw a line to connect the dots, which isn't really that fun, but hey, at least they tried to use the touchscreen for something. I don't really have a lot more to say about this game. It just feels like they got lazy with the level designs and tried to stretch out the runtime as much as possible. So far, I'd say that this is my least favorite of all the 3DS Skylanders games when it comes to innovation. So, C tier. Also, rest in peace, my robot Fistman. I still just can't believe that the 3DS games were as good as they were up to this point. But we aren't done with every game yet. And before we move on to the next game, I should clarify, these Skylanders games had separate adventure packs that were compatible, but I didn't play them because I didn't have them. There are also hats in every game, which I still don't like using because they make my Skylanders look silly. And like I mentioned with the first game, all data between the 3DS games and the main console games can be transferred between the systems. You just have to make sure you rescan the Skylander on the 3DS before you move it onto the console version. And like I said, that's awesome. All of these games are playable in 3D, and that's wild. Every one of these games have been a fantastic reimagined 3D platformer, except for maybe Trap Team. They all are meaty experiences completely separate from the mainline series. But the final Skylanders game on 3DS decided to take a very different approach from anything we had seen in the franchise so far. The next game is Skylanders SuperChargers Racing. Help. This game's main gimmick is vehicles. In the console versions, SuperChargers followed the same Skylanders formula as the rest of the series, but with really cool car chases and racing-based challenges throughout the levels. Personally, I really liked it and would even consider this to be my favorite gimmick and game in the series in terms of gameplay. But back when it released, the mainline SuperChargers was simply too beefy for the 3DS and Wii. In fact, this was the first time the Wii ports didn't get the same game at a lower quality. So what did the Skylanders team do? Instead of trying to cram a full Skylanders game onto the 3DS, they decided to fully lean into the racing side of things, turning the entire game into a racing game instead of a traditional 3D platformer fans had been used to for so long. So let's try out the 3DS version of Skylanders SuperChargers to see if it's a good game on its own, or if they should have tried something completely different or killed it entirely. But first of all, we need to acknowledge the collaboration of the century. They added the lads Donkey Kong and Bowie Kachowie, along with their dark variants and vehicles. This crossover was one of the biggest reasons I loved the console version when I was younger, and I still think this is one of the quirkiest things Nintendo has ever done. In fact, they leaned so far into this collab that these characters were featured on the Nintendo versions of the box art and starter packs. And of course, you already know these guys are only playable on Nintendo consoles. Please bring Samus to Fortnite. As I mentioned before, the Wii and 3DS versions of the game are full-blown racing games, built from the ground up. While there is a racing mode on the current-gen console versions, it was made with a completely different engine and features major gameplay tweaks. When you first boot up the game, whoa, for the first time in a 3DS Skylanders game, it starts off with an in-game rendered cutscene. How in the world could they do this? I just can't believe this. In this game, the main adventure is centered around 5 separate tours, which are basically worlds. Each tour has you completing standard races and challenges, like time trials or something like a drift challenge. There are 3 different types of vehicles. First, we have the land vehicles, which play a lot like Mario Kart. You can drift and boost just like you'd expect. Then there are the sky vehicles, like planes that let you participate in air races and dogfights, which are plane battles. It's a fancy way of saying plane battles. Finally, we have these sea vehicles, which, you guessed it, are water races. During all these races, your vehicle has a built-in weapon that can charge up using this blue energy stuff and fire at opponents to deal damage. Instead of spinning out immediately like in Mario Kart, each racer has a health bar, and only when that health bar is empty do you briefly spin out. This whole weapon and damage mechanic is actually pretty unique. You don't see it often in kart racers. I don't really have a strong opinion on it either way, but it's just another thing you have to keep track of. To recover health, you can pick up cakes scattered throughout the tracks. So it's not that bad, but depending on your vehicle state, it can completely change how you play. Alright, now let's talk about the vehicle types individually. First, sky races. These are probably my least favorite, mainly because they're just kind of boring. There's no tight track to fly on, and it doesn't feel like the ship is even going all that fast. I also found myself getting annoyed with the controls and handling of the plane. While you can upgrade handling by leveling up the plane, it still doesn't do enough to make me actually care about using them. Sea races were pretty fun though. I liked the handling and control of the vehicles on water. It had a nice feel to it. You can also pull off tricks off waves to get boosts, and time your vehicles to go underwater for even more boosts. It was solid, but still not as good as the main racing mode they should have focused on, which were the ground races. Now this is by far the best racing experience this game has to offer, which is why I'm surprised they bundled Bowser with his clown plane instead of Donkey Kong. I mean, yes, Donkey Kong was bundled in the Wii U version, but still, ground races are superior. And I think that largely comes down to the level design, and the fact that it's the most traditional racing game mode in the game. It's just fun. The drift to boost mechanic is only in these ground races, and it's fair to say that that's what makes them a lot more fun to play. On top of that, there's a jump button, which, by the way, wasn't even on the current gen console versions. And this jump button actually adds a ton. The core gameplay is good enough for a racing game, but I really wish they had just focused more on the ground races. I get why they didn't, because every race type is supposed to be treated equally, but I genuinely felt disappointed every time it went from a ground race to an air race. If you didn't have a ground or water vehicle, since the game doesn't come with one, this version actually lets you use this garbage default vehicle, so you can still experience the full game, which is interesting. Another gimmick to the racing is the supercharged ability. Basically, if you use a supercharger Skylander with its paired vehicle, the vehicle becomes supercharged, giving it way better stats. Which sounds cool, but honestly, it just makes me not want to use older Skylanders like my boy Dwayne. I just don't want to use him as much, or actually literally not at all, because why would I use him when I have a more beefy supercharger? There's no reason. I'm sorry, Dwayne. I'm sorry, I love you. Now, of course, there are still Skylanders gimmicks you have to deal with, like, you know, actually scanning the figures. Back when this game released, it was around the time the new Nintendo 3DS came out. This made the system faster in general, but also included the feature that would have been perfect for Skylanders on 3DS, the built-in NFC reader on the bottom screen. You'd think this would make Skylanders readable in SuperChargers, right? Well, no, that's not the case. You still needed to break out the old Swap Force portal and scan the Skylanders that way. Thankfully, just like in previous 3DS installments, characters and vehicles saved to the console itself, but I still find it odd that they didn't utilize the new NFC reader. Now, we know this game is completely different from the current gen console versions, but what about the Wii version? Well, this is pretty much the exact same game, downgraded even further, and in 3D. From what I can tell, all the tracks are the same and carried over with some slight adjustments. Some challenges also seem to be different on console, but overall, it's largely the same, using the same engine and in the feel. That said, aside from slightly higher resolution and local split-screen racing, I think the 3DS version might actually be better than the Wii version. All the Skylanders are saved to the system, and you can just pick it up and play, whereas on the Wii version, you had to scan a Skylander every time before a race. But there are some very 3DS things about this game I don't like the fact that I'm playing this on a tiny console. While I've been playing all the 3DS Skylanders games, this was the only one that actually made my hands cramp and ache while playing. Now, this could totally be user error, but holding the A button while pressing the shoulder buttons made my hands hurt. But what about performance? At this point, we should expect bad performance. And yes, the performance isn't great all the time, but I have to say, for the most part, it's actually pretty solid, with just a few hiccups here and there. I think one of the biggest drawbacks of the 3DS version specifically is the load times. There are a lot of them and they take forever, and for some reason, before every race starts, the game needs to rescan the Skylander and the vehicle on screen, which just adds even more time. Why do they need to show me this again? I already saw it when I picked my Skylander. And because the 3DS is a 3DS, the resolution is pretty low, which made some tracks hard to see in the distance. At least the music was good. As a Skylanders game, I'd say it's C tier. Probably one of the worst games yet. So here's our final roster of fallen Skylanders. Rest in peace. You fought hard. Well, that's every Skylanders game on 3DS. Honestly, they were a lot better than what I expected, especially the first three. These weren't just lazy handheld ports. They actually felt like their own thing, and for the most part, they were really good. At the end of the day, I think the 3DS just couldn't keep up with the franchise. By the time Skylanders Imaginators rolled around, the 3DS didn't even get a port, but there was a portable version that did end up on the Nintendo Switch, which is a weird version in and of itself. And if you want to see me play the Nintendo Switch version, click here, and if you want to see me play every other console version, click here. Once again, consider becoming a channel member to support me, and liking and subscribing. I'll see you in the next one. See you later.